Hey everyone, welcome to the Meaningful Revolution podcast. I'm your host, Shawn Buttner, and in this episode, we're going to be recapping AI Week at a very high level. So, some of the things I took away from our guests, from some of the thinking, some things that I'm thinking about right now, and a exciting announcement about something that's happening very soon for the Meaningful Revolution. So, stay tuned to find out. This week, we had some amazing guests on the Meaningful Revolution from Dr. Sarah Lavelle, David Deutsch, and Robert Murray, all talking about how they're using AI in their respective fields of expertise. Now, what's really exciting about this is as someone that's been in love with technology since I could basically walk and play with an Atari back in the 80s, not to date myself, but there you go. It was, this is a really exciting field. Like, this is something that I really nerd out about and think about. I've been thinking about a lot the last year and a half and have been using a lot of these tools in my business administration and just making my business work, but didn't really lean into how these tools can be really effective in my coaching business or actually helping me become a better podcaster. So, what I'll do right now is review some cool use cases from this past month. If you didn't listen to all the episodes, I totally get it. Also, as we'll talk about just how it reinforced the belief that I have about AI, some risks involved, and then we'll preview a little bit of what's going to be coming up in the Meaningful Revolution podcast, and then that exciting announcement that I'm sure you're just dying to know. So, what we're going to do first is, what I really loved about this last month was getting these perspectives from a coach, from a psychologist, and from an expert copywriter. And one of the use cases that seemed very clear to me on how AI can be really helpful is that it can be a creative assistant. David Deutsch was saying that you can get a copywriting intern to write you 100 kind of bad headlines, or you can get AI to generate 100 kind of bad headlines in a couple of minutes. And that's reinforced with how I've been using AI in my business with helping generate some of the podcast show notes and then modifying it and trying different forms there. You can help in market research. So help you figure out how can I create products, or is the market I'm operating in a viable one? So I've done some of that work with my man, Frank Kern, if you know who he is, internet marketer, talked about how to validate a market using ChatGPT and some other stuff. But ultimately, it and I'm skipping ahead here, but the big takeaway from this month has been AI is an amplifier, not a replacement. So it is the tomato sauce to the pasta that enhances the flavor. It is not the focus of the dish, or maybe it is in Italian food, but you get what I'm saying. It's the ketchup on your burger. It's not the burger itself, right? We still, as humans, cannot replicate the creative process. One of the inherent limits of AI is it's not creative. It can help you access all the knowledge up to this point, but it's still up to people and humans to push forward for now. So I really love that creative assistant, that amplifier, not a replacement for people idea that David Deutsch was talking about. But I also really love that in the actual operating of my business, and maybe you can think about how you can do in your profession or your business or your area, is how can you use AI to expand your footprint of support? So Dr. Sarah Lavelle talked about having an AI coach and not a therapist in her practice dealing with eating disorders, in that it's neutral. So if there are some vulnerability or rapport issues, like in her profession, that prevented people from fully sharing honestly, having a robot that's checking in with you regularly, that a normal person, it's just not feasible. There's only so many hours per day that you can be awake, and contacting one person at a time, where that just doesn't scale. But This could be something in your pocket, in your phone that's constantly checking in with her client in that particular case. How are you feeling about how you're eating and such? Where by the time the client gets in front of a human, they're a little bit more ready to be vulnerable. They've practiced it a little bit, a place where it's not so scary, and getting the help and intervention they need in real time. So, as a coach, I've been thinking about how can I add this into my stack of offerings in my business, less so in the podcast, because yeah, I think listening to content that's completely generated by the robots, by AI, is still a little funky. Myself, I don't like it. Why do that? But how can I use an AI clone of myself potentially to help educate people about what the type of coaching I do is, which is high performance coaching, and helping people feel like they can interact with me in a way that's a little bit more removed. So maybe they're a little bit more forthright or willing to explore without feeling that commitment to actually sign up for coaching or the other barriers that prevent people from signing up. So that's got me thinking about that. I'd love to hear what you guys are thinking for how maybe you can add this bigger support footprint of being available 24/7 or just being able to scale up what you do a bit more with AI. So hopefully you're thinking about that yourself. I also think Robert Murray talked about utilizing these AI tools as a feedback loop or conversation analyzer. So getting into I've actually implemented this more with the podcast where I can, after an interview, throw our conversation, the transcript into ChatGPT or Claude or any of them and be like, what, how will it make me a better podcaster? What are some threads that I could have dug into deeper? What are some better questions I could have asked? And it's an extra feedback loop that allows me to either agree or disagree with it because sometimes it's not really relevant or still like the conversation goes where it needs to go. And it might have been awkward to switch the conversation or focus in a bit more. But it gets me thinking like, oh, I could have dug more into this particular topic. I could have dug into or asked them these series of questions to maybe get a more heartfelt type of response. And so doing that in coaching conversations, and we'll get in with the proper releases because there are some risks with putting this type of stuff in there. This is all podcast is all public, so it's all good. Really has been helpful, right? And where are places in your life where you are having generating transcriptions, right? Whether that's a Zoom recording that can now automatically generate transcriptions, is it conversations that you're having on podcasts? Are you doing YouTube videos as a creator? And could you throw in those transcripts and ask like a chat GPT, what would make this better? Or what are different ways I could have presented this that would help me improve the craft of being a YouTube creator, of being a podcaster, of being a coach, of being a therapist? Again, with the caveat that you got to be worried about the data, but we'll go more into that in a second. Those are some of the high level things that I've really been thinking about from this past month. But the second thing that I wanted to do today is talk about the core belief I still have about AI. And it was just validated through these conversations this past month. And that is it's a tool and a tool can amplify the work you're doing, but won't replace. So I still think that you can, and I've been using the phrase punch above your weight class in that, in boxing, or you get weighted. So the fight's fair, but you can become a more of an expert in coding and copywriting and all these different facets by using these tools as research assist or as a brainstorming companion. And it can help you do your work quicker. So in my business, if you have found or seen any of the clips I've done on YouTube or Instagram or Facebook, the shorts, I basically let the editor that I use, Descript, has some AI functionality. Pick out some of the more relevant clips. So I can actually outsource that work. So things that would take me in editing and putting all that stuff together would take me a day or two. I can now get done in 4 hours, which is great. It's amplifying my ability to do this. It's not necessarily replacing me. I still have to pull the levers, push the buttons, make sure that I'm looking over things. Does this make sense? Is there enough context here for a short clip for people to know what's going on? Those types of things. But this is an amplifier, not a replacement, which I know there's been a lot of churn out in the world about being replaced by robots. And I think the thing to really think about is, will you get displaced by someone that is more prolific than you are, right? Using these tools in particular. We have a chance to become more prolific, to have a higher skill than we might normally have by yourself through these. Yeah, it's really important to be thinking through those types of things and making sure that you are not getting in a position where you're going to be at a disadvantage because you haven't been playing with it. So again, experiment with these tools. Go on ChatGPT, go on Claude, go on Gemini, start playing around, get a feel for what you can do in your life with these, and it'll help you in your career and as we go forward. And this gets even more enmeshed into everything that we do. And I think that's a pretty good bet. Who knows? All right. So the third thing I wanted to talk to y'all about today is some of the risks that we talked about this past month too, right? And the very first thing is, with any of this, anything that is generated with the AI, it is still a human's responsibility to edit, to make sure that it's correct, which is actually weirdly, if you're an expert coder or an expert doctor, you have deep knowledge in a particular subject, you're going to be better at discerning like, oh, this is on the right path, or, hey, through experience, I know that this is going to go into a dark place. We should ask a more intelligent question or have it modified to be more in line with best practices, with the things that are going to be effective, or avoid pitfalls as we go forward. We need to be an editor, right? David Deutsch said sometimes language just sounds more flowery. In his field of copywriting, you don't want to sound a little bit pretentious or a little bit too flowery in the language, right? You don't want to say dumb down the language, but you might want to. Yeah, we still need a human editor. We still need someone who is thinking like, does this sound like a person? If not, how do we change, maybe get the core idea that's trying to be conveyed and switch it into something it's a little bit more easy to understand, a little bit more concise, a little bit less flowery in language, which is really helpful if you do any type of writing with AI. I think what Dr. Sarah was saying, Sarah Lavelle, is that this does not replace therapy. It's an AI coach. It's not an AI therapist, because as she was explaining, the continuum of care is like the AI coach can help people with very low needs in her particular field, or can help assess and say, hey, based on how you responded, we actually need you to advance and see someone in person, right? And they can help gather information potentially and set up a therapist then to go through the case. And if the therapist goes in and go, you have this bad, you escalate into a 24/7 care facility with mental health professional versus like maybe meeting once a week or every other week. So it part of the process, but it doesn't actually replace the work. So when you hear people trying to sell you an AI therapist, an AI coach, without having any human contact, I feel like those are going to lead to a lot of frustration, especially if something goes wrong or awry. You want to talk to a human and know that they understand the direness of it. It doesn't replace things. Third risk that I think both Robert and Sarah talked about, Dr. Sarah talked about this last month, were data considerations, right? So with therapy, there's HIPAA type things you have to worry about, meaning that it's protected or health and medical information and how they get passed on and stored. And there's a lot of rules that go around that that are important so that people don't have their therapy notes leak and it impacts a job or gets put on media or whatnot. So there's like certain privacy related things that are important. Robert highlighted this too on as you pass stuff into a chat GPT or cloud or thing, it goes into the larger like model, right? That could potentially reveal secrets or reveal private information that people wouldn't be comfortable sharing. You have to think, do you obscure names when you feed conversation into particular systems, or if it something got revealed, will it come back to haunt you? So I don't think we have a strong sense of how this can be privacy can be impacted on here. But we do know that once the data's out, it's out and you can't get it back. So that's something worth thinking about. All right. So those are the three big things I wanted to talk to y'all about today. Going forward, I'm setting up to do a leadership month, right? So another thing that I'm really passionate about and have since I went through business school all those years ago is how people lead, how people come together to accomplish things that are even greater than themselves, how people manage teams, and how do you create high performance teams, or why do some teams fail, those types of things. Absolutely love these types of questions. And having been on the inside of some large corporations in my career as a software engineer, it's still super fascinating, right? So basically, what's going on is if you've been listening to the podcast for a little bit, you've probably have seen or heard that I'm starting a community around the podcast. And the idea is, how can I interact with you guys more? How can I, how can we come together as a community to lead a movement of meaningful revolutions? And so I did what I normally do, and that is just jump into it, start something, get some data. And I like to call this the messy phase of any project where you start to do stuff and start to figure it out, right? And what am I trying to say here? Yeah, the initial idea was to have a place where all of us revolutionaries can meet digitally, support each other, and interact a little bit more. And so after jumping in, this last month has provided some data. And so I go into the next phase, which I call the informed mess phase of any project. So there's a little bit of data. There's still a bunch of things up in the air being tested out, but things are a little bit more focused and tighter. And I got a little bit clearer on what I wanted the community to be, which is a community of fellow business owners and creators that are working together to improve our businesses, to improve our craft, and to basically serve more out in the world, right? And maybe if that's you, if you're a business owner or creator that's looking to have some extra support, you'd want to join the Meaningful Revolution Club, which is the tentative name. It's probably going to change as this thing evolves, but why would you want to do this? Each month, we would talk about our meaningful pursuits. We'd brainstorm how to level up our interests, our focus, our businesses, and our service and contribute more to all around us. So if we're talking things that I'm passionate about, I just talked about AI for a whole month. I'm planning on doing the same thing for leadership. Service is always something I'm also really focused on in this brand. We talked about it earlier today, and just how this podcast is a way for me to network and for me to highlight how awesome you are and the work that you're doing and your thing that you nerd out about. Share that with the world and hopefully generate some buzz for you. So that's a service part of this particular podcast. But yeah, all of these things are very important to me. And I'd love to just stop to invite you in. So If you are interested in getting around a group of creators and business owners that are trying to serve greater and with more excellence, then make sure you sign up for my newsletter because later this week I'll be sending out an email inviting people into a like soft launch, like beta testing type community and looking for 10 to maybe 20 people that are interested in just getting in at the ground level to start forming and shaping and building this community together. This will be a paid community in the future. Right now, I'm still trying to figure that out. So if you act within the next week, the chances are you will actually be able to join for free. And as we move forward, we'll start adding a price barrier into the community to make sure people are serious. But in this figuring it out phase, this informed mess stage, as things are getting a little bit more defined, I just want to invite you as a listener and someone that's been following me for a while to really, yeah, get to know each other and help each other out as we go forward. So if that is you, if you're not already on my email list, you can go to ShawnButtner.com/MRP, which is Meaningful Revolution Podcast, MRP. And you'll see a video kind of talking about the podcast and a place to sign up for the newsletter. That's probably the best place to go if you are interested. And when you sign up, like I said, later this week, I'll have an invite. You reply to the email, and then we're doing it, right? We're in it. And I'll explain a little bit more about what that is in that email, what you get and all that stuff. With that, I invite you to go to ShawnButtner.com/MRP. Provide your name and email, get on the list, and then I hope to see you in our Meaningful Revolution Club. With that said, this is Shawn Buttner saying, just signing off, I guess. See you in the community and take care.